Hey everybody, it's Captain Kyle. I am here at Dragon Con with the amazing Jim Butcher. You might know him as the author of the Dresden Files, the Codex Alera, the Cinder Spires series, and a Spider-Man novel, apparently, as well. So, how are you doing today?
I can't complain. Well, I could, but nobody's going to listen. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, they could listen. If you really want to complain, go ahead.
Oh well, I started taking my stepson to be boxing and threw out a disc in my back while I was boxing. So I've been spending the past several months dealing with that, and it's slowly getting better. But it's one of those things. It's like you gotta work and do things that hurt in order to make it not hurt. So it's one of those PT situations where I'm just kind of working through it gradually.
No pain, no gain.
Exactly.
I prefer the whole no pain thing personally.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. Apparently, I gotta go through the desert to do it. So,
just don't go on a horse with no name. So, I've read all about you, and I've read your books too, which is kind of helpful. But your early introduction to sci-fi and fantasy were, if I'm not mistaken, The Lord of the Rings and the Brian Daley Han Solo adventures.
Yeah, they were. It was the first fantasy I ever read was Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that was when they still sold books in grocery stores on a more regular basis, and so I picked it up in the grocery store and read that one, and I was so excited about the rest of the series that I made my mom buy the rest, and then I got sick, and my sisters went out and got me Lord of the Rings and the Han Solo trilogy, and I think I was about 8 years old when they did that, and it was I was homesick for a week and spent the whole time just glued to these books reading. It was the old primary color Tolkien books, the red, green, yellow, blue ones, so that was a great deal of fun. And Brian Daley, I thought, did a good job writing Han Solo. So I still go back and read those occasionally.
Those were some of my first Star Wars novels that I read, and Splinter the Mind's Eye and all that stuff. It was.
I remember that one too. Was Alan Dean Foster, right?
Alan Dean Foster did that one. Yes. Yeah. Are you still a Star Wars fan?
I haven't paid as much attention lately. I kind of went to Rise of Skywalker. It was just like, okay, we're just not doing proper storytelling structure at all here, are we? And that's cool. I mean, if you're creative, people are going to come up with different things, going to do different stuff. But that one wasn't for me, and I didn't go see Rise of Skywalker. So I'm told some people really loved it, some people didn't care for it at all. It looked like they spent a lot of money on it, though.
I'm pretty sure that they spent a ton of money on it.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is the storytellers changed between movie 1, 2, and 3.
I think they didn't have a plan for the trilogy. And if you're going to write a trilogy, you're writing Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. You need to have a plan for those. And they didn't. Which just flabbergasted me when that came out, that they hadn't gotten the whole thing put together before they did it. It's like you should at least have, an outline. Write it up a little, write a story sentence, something.
Yeah, little what do they call a little pitch for each movie?
Yeah, and also I think when you get to big production stuff, everybody at the company wants to have a fingerprint on it. So everybody's got to have their little thing that they change and so on. I imagine being a writer for that would be very, very frustrating and borderline impossible. So
yes, just stick to small stuff.
Maybe so.
Now, with Lord of the Rings, which I also had those primary color books. Oh, yeah. I think I'm older than you by like 6 months. So, we're in that same era. But a lot of people do say that The Lord of the Rings caused a shift in how fantasy was perceived and written that has lasted quite a bit, kind of away from the contemporary fantasy and more into like the sword and sorcery stuff. But what kind of decided you in making Harry Dresden a contemporary wizard and not set in, medieval times?
Oh, God. See, I started off writing swords and horses fantasy, and that's what I wanted to do. And I told my writing teacher in college, I want to write swords and horses fantasy. Her name was Debbie Chester, and she was professor at the professional writing program at the University of Oklahoma, and she's the one who taught me everything I need to know about writing. And And so I was writing these, swords and horses fantasies, for her. In her class, I was taking a course called Writing a Genre Fiction Novel, and what you did over the semester was you wrote a novel. And so I was busy doing that, and I'd done that several times. And at one point, we were in a conference. She was like, "Hey, Jim, you keep writing these fantasy novels, yet when you're in class, you're always talking about Babylon 5 and Buffy the Vampire Slayer as examples of good writing. Have you ever considered? I mean, you seem to have a good vibe with that. Have you ever considered writing that?" And I was like, "No, I'm going to write swords and horses fantasy like Tolkien." And so she did that. She made that suggestion to me every semester for a couple of years, and I'm not too bright, so it took some time to sink in. But when it finally did, then I decided one semester that I was just going to prove her wrong. That was the only solution. I was going to have to prove my professor wrong because I had a bachelor's degree in English literature with an emphasis in creative writing, and whereas she had merely published 40 novels. So what did she know? Obviously. So one year I decided, so that semester I decided, okay, I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to do it, in Socratic style. I'm going to do absolutely everything she tells me. I'm going to fill out all her little forms and do all her little worksheets, just everything that she says. And then she'll see exactly what kind of, cookie cutter pablum nonsense emerges from that kind of process. And I wrote the first book of the Dresden Files, which showed her.
Yeah, you did really well there.
Yeah, that let her know she was completely wrong. But I remember when I turned the first couple of chapters in, she picked them up and read them. And now, bear in mind, this is somebody who really believed in preparing you for the New York market. She wasn't mollycoddling her students. You'd done something wrong. She'd say, "This was dumb, and here's why," and that sort of thing. And her responses to my chapters had included such things as rolling up my chapter into a roll, leaning across the desk, and popping me on the head with it, saying, "What were you thinking?" That sort of. There was that kind of critique. And she gets done reading it, and she's squares the chapters up because we still printed them on pages at that time and put them down and looks across the desk at me and says, "You did it." I said, "What?" She says, "You did it. This is going to sell. I don't know if this will be the first thing you sell, but it is of professional quality. You will be able to sell it. Hang on to it." And my jaw was just hanging down in my lap, as I was sitting there. And she says, "Okay, now come back next week with an outline for the rest of it." And she meant the rest of the novel. And, but being the kind of person I was, I rolled in next week with, because I'm a bit of a nerd, which means I have nerd enthusiasm. And when the next week I rolled in with an outline for a 20-book series with a 3-book trilogy at the end to kind of finish the whole thing off. And it was a 40-minute consult class, and I spent the entire time talking about the rest of the series and everything that was going to happen. And I realized at some point that she'd never gotten a word in edgewise to the consult class I was supposed to be taking. So I had about 3 minutes left. So I stopped. I said, "What do you think?" And I could still see the look on her face in my head. I could still remember what she says. And she kind of looks at me, and she's got this look like, I've just gotten this kid on board. I can't throw him off the rails now by telling him there's no way he's going to sell this series. So she said he's going to sell this as his first thing out. And so she says, "I think if you can publish a 20-book series, should be doing okay." And I said, "Okay, great." And then I went off to do it. And because she hadn't told me that it was impossible, I did it. But if she'd said something, I don't think I would have. So that was an excellence of restraint as a teacher right there. It was a good moment for her.
Very, very cool. And, it was definitely a different style of fantasy, which I appreciated when I picked it up. But why do you think the name Harry is associated with such wizards of note?
Well, for me, it was Harry Houdini, Harry Blackstone. I was putting Harry Dresden together, and I hadn't even heard of Harry Potter at the time. I think I started Dresden in 95 or 96 was the first time I started writing. And I think Buffy came out just a few months after. And then about 3 years later, Harry Potter was on the cover of Life or Time or whatever it was. I remember that cover, though, when it was a big deal. Everybody was yelling about the books and so on. And I remember at the time, because I still hadn't sold, that was in 1999, I think, and I still hadn't sold my book. I wouldn't do that till the next year. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, oh my gosh, everybody's going to think I just copied her. And then I stopped and thought to myself, 5 years from now, all these kids who read Harry Potter are going to be teenagers wanting to read something edgier. And I thought, maybe this will be good for me. And I think it kind of was.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely much more edgy. Now, I'm going out of order of my questions here because now I actually enjoyed the Dresden Files series on Syfy, and I'm very sad that it went away. Casting-wise, Paul Blackthorne did an excellent job. However, he was not the first choice of the role, and you keep mentioning Buffy's. James Marsters, I believe, was the first choice of the role.
Oh, I would have loved to have gotten James. That would have been fantastic, but I don't even know if they talked to him about it. Little known fact, it came down to two people. One of them was Paul Blackthorne. He wound up getting the role because they thought he did that dark edge of Dresden a bit better. But the other guy they had for him was Adam Baldwin, was trying out for him. This is right after he got done with Firefly. And so he was the other guy they were trying out for the role. And that would have been a much more bulldog, made to look foolish, more often Harry. And I think that would also have worked well.
There's all kinds of great interpretations of these characters. But yeah, James Marsters apparently didn't want to move from L.A. That's why he...
Oh, yeah, because they were filming in Toronto. Yeah. Yeah, I think he had some things going at the time.
Yeah, well... Unfortunately, we never got a Spike follow-up series, but...
Oh, that's true. That's true. I do hear there was supposed to be a rumor that Spike was going to appear in Firefly in season 2 of Firefly. I think he was going to be in a bar and look at Mal and said, "Trust me, things never change," and that was going to be like his whole role in it. I would have loved to see that.
That would have been cool, getting season 2 of Firefly. So, moving on to some of your other work, the Codex Alera. I understand that was created based on a bet. Someone said you can take two horrible things and make you can't make a successful novel out of it. Well, what did you win?
I had something to prove on that bet. Well, it was just a bet. It was on the Del Rey Online Writers Workshop, which they had at the time, and online was new. Writers Workshops online were new. Nobody knew how copyright law was going to interact with the internet in terms of, well, if you published it to the internet, does that count as published or not, in terms of legally speaking. And so no one wanted to be the first one to go find out. So they were having these online writers workshops, and so you would get on there, and it was all a bunch of wannabe writers and internet loudmouths, and that's what I was at the time, was an internet loudmouth. And you would talk about writing, and you would talk about aspects of writing, movies, and so on. There were various discussions that went on, and we wound up in one of those discussions that was like, you hit reply, caps lock, and start typing. One of those discussions, and so the discussion that was going around was, well, what is was the idea of the holy idea, capital H, capital I, holy idea. Because the argument on this side was, if you had a good enough idea, it doesn't matter how badly written it was, it would do well. You'd be successful if it's a good enough idea. And they said, look at Jurassic Park. Their example, not mine. And that's a great idea. How can you miss with that idea? And then the other side of the idea was, the other side of the argument was the side that I was the champion of. And I was saying it doesn't matter how old or worn out the idea is. If you're a creative enough writer, you can take that idea. You can make it yours. You can create something unique with it. You can do something cool and fun that people are going to like and go see. How many versions of Romeo and Juliet have we seen? Like that. And so that argument went back and forth for a while. And finally, the guy on the other side says, okay, I'll tell you what. How about you let me give you a terrible idea? And let's see you write it into a story that makes money if you're so creative and successful. I said, and I was in my 20s at the time, and I knew a lot more then than I do now. And I looked back at him and I said, no, I tell you what, why don't you give me two terrible ideas? I'll use them both. Like that, because that was sort of the attitude I had at the time. And so the guy says, all right, first terrible idea is Lost Roman Legion. I am so sick of Lost Roman Legion stories. All the Lost Roman Legion should have been found by now. That's idea number one. I said, okay, what's number two? And he says, Pokemon. I freaking hate Pokemon. Because that was on in the morning. It was a cartoon that was on in the morning. And I was looking at him in this discussion because I was watching that cartoon every morning with my son, and it was incredibly resonant with him and with all the other kids who were around and so on. It was like, it's really, and it was just, it's basic little stories, but it had, some monsters that would be your pets, and you could go out and fight, and there were some stakes, and then at the end, the good guys won, and you went home happy. And I was like, okay, all right, let me, I couldn't believe he thought that was a bad idea. And, the next several years proved him wrong. I went and I researched it, and I said, okay, let's look at Lost Roman legions. You're usually talking about the Ninth Hibernian Legion when you talk about Lost Roman legions, though there were a couple others. There's one that marched off from the Eastern Empire and might have settled in China. We don't know, but there's a village out there where there's a lot of people with red hair. But the Ninth Hibernian was the one who marched north of the Wall in Britain, and just were never seen again. And either it stands to reason either they were wiped out or they settled down with the Celts and sort of blended in, one or the other. But I decided that in my world that they had marched off into a thunderstorm and vanished and were never seen again. And then I said, where did they go? Land of the Pokemon. Okay, so we set up Land of the Pokemon, and Pokemon itself is two ideas put together. And Pokemon takes the concept of the Shinto religion of kami, which takes it says that all natural things have a spirit within them. So a tree has a spirit, a mountain has a spirit, a river has a spirit, even a pebble has a spirit. And these spirits are called kami, and they're elements of the divine. And I said, okay, we're gonna, and then they took that and they smashed it together with professional wrestling, and that's where Pokemon comes from. And so I said, okay, well, let's have them go off to this land of the kami, but they're not going to call them kami, obviously, because there's not going to be any Japanese people in a Roman legion. So let's, what are they going to call them? And I was in the background, I was watching Big Trouble in Little China while I was putting this together, and I just got to the point where Egg Chen says, all movement in the universe is caused by tension between positive and negative furies. And I went, ooh, furies, it's even Greco-Roman, I can use that. And so they called them furies. And then I said, okay, well, I gave them, 2,000 years to develop to cook up a society and a civilization, and they wound up with this bifurcated society that was half Roman cosmopolitan centers and half German freeholds, because they were about half Germans. About half that legion was German mercenaries, and so I put that together, and then I went back to the guy and I said, hey, this is coming together pretty well. I don't think I want to put it up here. I think I want to publish it. He goes, oh, so in other words, I win. I'm like, okay, man, whatever, you win. And so he got to win the online bet, and I got a 6-book contract. So
I think you came out ahead.
I think that was a successful loss for me. Those happen sometimes.
So are you thinking about at any point maybe revisiting that same world and, creating more fiction, or is that something you can't talk about because it's in the works?
It's something I've considered. I've got several points where I can go back to. And several places that would make for a good story if I wanted to go do it. I haven't yet. I've got a bunch of ideas that I want to write, and I've got enough ideas that I'm going to be writing until I'm like 120 to be able to write them all at the pace I'm going. So if I can, I'll get back to it. Maybe I'll start. I seem to be ramping up speed again, so perhaps I'll start doing that some more, and then maybe I'll have another story to do. Although, like I said, there's all these different worlds in my head and all these different characters, and I haven't got to use them anywhere. And, it's like squirrels scratching the inside of my head. I've got to get them out at some point. So.
Probably a good idea to get those out. Oh, yeah. You also have the Cinder Spires series, and that's a trilogy, or it's meant to be a trilogy. You put out 2 books. When can fans expect the next one?
I'm about to finish the next Dresden. And then I'll finish that in the next few weeks.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, it'll be done in the next. I wanted to have it done before I came here, and then things got crazy the past couple of weeks, and I wasn't able to. But I really wanted to come to DragonCon to say the next one's done, but it will be in the next few weeks. And then I'll start in the new Cinder Spires, and hopefully that will take off, and I'll write like a house on fire and finish that by before next summer. That's my goal.
Okay. And then, all the stuff that goes beyond that. Back to Dresden, any chance of a new reimagined series? Has there been any nibbles about, bringing that back or reimagining it with probably Paul Blackthorne might not be, keen to reprise the role, but
perhaps not. It's been, the rights of it have been out. Constantly since I got him back. I mean, there's been people interested in him. It was with the Donner Company for a while. It's been with other companies for a while. I do think that that we'll get to do it again at some point. I don't know when. I think we will. That just seems there's no proof of that. I have no evidence of that, but that seems like something that is certain. It's just a question of when. There's some talk right now. We'll see if anything happens. I don't know if it will or not. But I hope it will.
Okay. We all hope it does too. Well,
It'd be fun.
I'm sure there's 3 people in Alaska who don't want it to happen, but
Sure.
the hell with them.
Well, they're probably jocks.
Yeah, don't get me on the whole jocks nerds thing. Any other projects that are in the works that you care to share?
No, not at this time. I mean, I'm a fairly simple guy. I'm writing this Dresden story. I just started as my dumb little wizard story I wrote to prove my teacher wrong, and it's gotten completely out of hand. And I'm just trying to keep doing it. This new story's been the new one I'm working on now. It's been really challenging just because it's a much more internally focused book in terms of how do you handle all the stuff that Dresden's been through. He's been through a lot of stuff, and how do you deal with that? And it's been a real challenge writing it because, I'm writing a book over a course of a year. Normally when I write a Dresden book, it's okay, this is going to happen over the course of just the worst weekend of Dresden's year, and that's what I'm going to write about. And this one, I'm starting it in summer and going all the way around the year and just showing, how do you recover from bad stuff and sort of, going through it with him. And it's been a real challenge, and I hope it will, I hope the fans will like it, but it'll be a little bit different than the regular Dresden book.
Very cool. I mean, I like the character. I wouldn't want to be in the character's shoes, having read his trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to say to your fans as we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to tell you guys how grateful I am that you actually spend money on my stuff. We kind of live in a world where it is easier to go online and get it for free than it is to go pay for it. And that's just the world we live in. And yet if that happened, there would be, very few professional working artists. So for the folks who are, who actually spend their hard-earned money on my material, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well said. And, thank you, Jim. This has been a lot of fun. And thanks everyone out there for watching. And we will see you next time.
Take care, guys.
As always, have fun and follow your fandom.
Thank you for watching this video. I am Invader Zim, and I traffic in doom. And so, if you do not subscribe to this channel, you will have doom that befalls you by me, Invader Zim.